It is good that you are here to record this picture of me in my palace garden at Addis Ababa. People who see this throughout the world will realize that even in the 20th century, with faith, courage, and a just cause, David will still beat Goliath.
የተቻለንን ለመዋጋት ቆርጠን ተነሳን። ለምንዋጋበት ብዙ እርዳታ አላገኘንም። ፋሺስት ላደረገው ነገር ለመመከት
Yes, the Ethiopian people as well as myself fought as much as we could on the ground, the fascist aggressors. But as it is well known, the fascists were well armed. They had the latest weapons. They had air power. Ethiopia had possessed none. After losing the battle in the front, we thought we should start another battle, a political battle at the League of Nations. You have heard of the speech I have made and of the appeal I have made to the League of Nations in 1936.
My personal feeling with my hope, I continue to struggle to have our freedom from the fascists.
Did you ever give up hope, Your Imperial Majesty?
Never, in any time. I continue with big hope because I have a relation with my patriot people. I continue to encourage them. They continue their struggle. If I haven't this hope, I can't resist to live. With this hope, I hope very strong hope, I live for a year and a half in England. ኢትዮጵያ ምንም ፕሮብለም አንድም ያለው ፕሮብለም የህዝቡ
Yes, the problem we have in Ethiopia is essentially the same as in all other developing countries. The problem that we face is how to quickly raise the standard of living of our people, how to strengthen our democratic constitution in practice. But there is no problem as opposition to the state or opposition to me.
The Queen of Sheba, she go to visit Solomon, King Solomon. She met one friend. She returned back to her country. Our story says since that time we son from King Solomon comes. If you read the Bible, you can get this what time the Christianity comes in Ethiopia.
The book of Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament mentions the story of the first convert to Christianity. That was the Ethiopian eunuch, who was the courtier of Candace, Queen of Ethiopia. He had been up to worship at Jerusalem, and on his way home, driving along in his chariot and reading the prophet Isaiah, met the apostle Philip, who preached to him about Christ, the Son of God. And when the eunuch believed, Philip baptized him in the water, and the eunuch went on his way home rejoicing. This, according to the Bible, is the first Ethiopian to be converted to Christianity. The story is found in the book of Acts, chapter 8, verses 26 to 39. Yes, my coronation day was very memorable to me. Not only we had Ethiopian participants in the event, but also a lot of foreign emissaries partook in the celebration of the coronation day.
The coronation itself was a Coptic service, Your Imperial Majesty.
They are the Coptic, but also the Ethiopian bishop. They are with the Coptic churchmen.
The form of government we have in Ethiopia is essentially what we have inherited from our forefathers. We have merely established the constitution in order to give it a legal and a firm basis. In order to have a firm democratic basis, you must have education on a wider scale. For that purpose, we have seen to it that educational facilities are expanded throughout the country. We based ourselves on certain fundamental democratic ideologies. These have been practiced by our forefathers. We give legal sanction to it, and this, in the broad aspect, is the general framework of the Ethiopian governmental institution. What the people of Ethiopia need now is to get as much foreign aid as possible, so that the developmental process of the country will be quickened. And once we achieve this, we are going to be in a position to make, with other countries, maximum contribution to the maintenance of international peace and security.
Is there a parliament in Ethiopia, Your Imperial Majesty?
Since I gave the constitution, we have the parliament with all power. We gave the power useful for the parliament.
We have two chambers in our parliament. One is the Senate, whose members are appointed by the government. The other is the lower house, or House of Representatives, whose members are elected directly by the people. These two bodies work in cooperation, and together they constitute the Parliament of Ethiopia.
There are millions of Christians throughout the world, Your Imperial Majesty, who regard you as the reincarnation of Jesus Christ.
I had heard of that idea. I also met certain Rastafarians. I told them clearly that I am a man, that I am mortal, and that I will be replaced by the oncoming generation, and that they should never make a mistake in assuming or pretending that the human being is emanated from a deity.
I have in my palace many lions, dogs, other animals also. Generally, I like very much the animal.
Industry is developed in our country, but we do not find the rate of growth fully satisfactory. And I'm confident that we'll quicken the pace of industrial development.
Africa, ፊትም ቢሆን አፍሪካውያኖች የምንተሳሰብነን
The people of Africa had closer sentiments to each other, even before they were free. I remember when our country fell a victim to fascist aggressors, we got the sympathy of Africans everywhere. But at that time, since the African people were not free, they were not in a position to manifest in concrete fashion their sympathy and their detest for fascist aggression. However, now that the African people are free, they wanted to get together for the purpose of widening the sphere of cooperation among them. And in this respect, Ethiopia is proud in being the site at which the Organization of African Unity has been established and where the headquarters of the organization has been housed. Africans are brothers. We have the same goal. We cherish the same ideas. Our problems are problems of development, problems of increasing cooperation. And as such, we shall forever march together to fulfill our aspirations as Africans. I also believe that when African people get closer and expand the sphere of their mutual cooperation, then Africa as a continent will be in a position to have a significant voice in the international affairs which affect the question of peace and war.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, 27 years ago, as Emperor of Ethiopia, I mounted the rostrum in Geneva, Switzerland, to address to the League of Nations an appeal for relief from the destruction which had been unleashed against my defenseless nation by the fascist invader. I spoke then both to and for the conscience of the world. My words went unheeded, But history testifies to the accuracy of the warning that I gave in 1936. Today, I stand before the World Organization which has succeeded to the mantle discarded by its discredited predecessor. In this body is enshrined the principle of collective security, which is unsuccessfully invoked at Geneva. Here in this assembly reposes the best, perhaps the last hope for the peaceful survival of mankind. In 1936, I declared that it wasn't the covenant of the League that was at stake, but international morality. Undertakings, I said then, are of little worth if the will to keep them is lacking. The Charter of the United Nations expressed the noblest aspirations of man. The application of force in the settlement of disputes between states. The assurance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. The safeguarding of international peace and security. But these two, as were the phrases of the covenant, are only words. Their value depends wholly on our will to observe and honor them and give them content and meaning. The preservation of peace and the guaranteeing of man's basic freedoms and rights require courage and eternal vigilance. Courage to speak and act, and, if necessary, to suffer and die for truth and justice. Eternal vigilance that the least transgression of international morality shall not go undetected and unremedied. These lessons must be learned anew by each succeeding generation. And that generation is fortunate indeed, which learns from other than its own bitter experience. This organization and each of its members bear a crushing and awesome responsibility to absorb the wisdom of history and to apply it to the problems of the present in order that future generations may be born and live and die in peace. Should we fail to achieve this goal, we shall have condemned the coming generations to inherit the tragedy of our time.
በማስታወቅ መጪው ትውልድ በሰላም ለመኖር እንዲችል ለማድረግ ታላቅና ከባድ ኃላፊነት አለበት። ከእውቀትና ከተነገረ በኋላ እንዳይሰራበት ቢሰናከል መጪው ትውልድ መከራ ውስጥ እንዲገባ እንደፈረድንበት ይቆጠራል።
I have lived too long to cherish many illusions about the essential high-mindedness of men when brought into stark confrontation with the issue of control over their security and their property interests. Not even now, when so much is at stake, would many nations willingly entrust their destinies to other hands. Yet, this is the ultimatum presented to us. Secure the conditions whereby men will entrust their security to a larger entity or risk annihilation. Persuade men that their salvation rests with the subordination of national and local interests to the interests of mankind, or endanger man's future. These are the objectives, yesterday unattainable, today essential, which we must labor to achieve. Until this is accomplished, mankind's future remains hazardous, and permanent peace a matter for speculation. I would now like to mention briefly today two particular issues: disarmament and the establishment of true equality among men. Disarmament has become the urgent imperative of our time. I do not say this because I believe that the absence of arms is tantamount to peace, or because I believe that bringing an end to the nuclear arms race automatically guarantees the peace, or because the elimination of nuclear warheads from the arsenals of the world will bring in its wake that change in attitude required for a peaceful settlement of disputes between nations. Disarmament is vital today because of the immense destructive capacity which men now possess. Ever since the Stone Age, the production of arms has always been the source of man's own destruction. Even though the achievement of general and complete disarmament is time-consuming, it is encouraging to note that great efforts are being devoted to attainment. My country supports the nuclear test ban treaty in the atmosphere as a step towards this goal, even though it is only a partial step. The real significance of the treaty is that it admits of a tacit stalemate between the nations which negotiated it, a stalemate which recognizes the blunt, unavoidable fact that none would emerge from the total destruction which would be the lot of all in a nuclear war. A stalemate which affords us and the United Nations a breathing spell in which to act. The goal of the equality of man which we seek is the very antithesis of the exploitation of one people by another, about which the pages of history, and particularly those written about the African and Asian continents, speak at such length. Last May in Addis Ababa, there was convened a meeting of heads of African states and governments. For 3 days, the 32 nations represented at that conference demonstrated to the world that when the will and the determination exist, nations and peoples of various backgrounds can and will work together in unity to the achievement of common goals in the assurance of that equality and brotherhood which we desire. Although our position vis-à-vis the power blocks is identified with the policy of non-alignment, our past history testifies to the fact that we've always endeavored to cooperate with all nations without exception. Thus, one of the fundamental principles we have agreed upon at the Addis Ababa Summit Conference gives expression to our fundamental desire to live in harmony and cooperation with all states. On the question of racial discrimination, the Addis Ababa Conference taught to those who will learn this further lesson, that until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, until there are no longer first-class and second-class citizens of any nature, until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes, that until the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race, that until that day, the dream of lasting peace and world citizenship and the rule of international morality will remain but a fleeting illusion to be pursued but never attained. And until the ignoble and unhappy regimes that hold our brothers in Angola, in Mozambique and in South Africa in subhuman bondage have been toppled and destroyed, until bigotry and prejudice, malicious and inhuman self-interest have been replaced by understanding and tolerance and goodwill, until all Africans stand up and speak as free human beings, equal in the eyes of all men, as they are in the eyes of heaven, until that day, the African continent will not know peace. We Africans will fight if necessary, and we know that we shall win as we are confident in the victory of good over evil. The basis of racial discrimination and colonialism has been economic, and it is with economic weapons that these evils have been and can be overcome. In pursuance of resolutions adopted at the Addis Ababa Summit Conference, African states have undertaken certain measures in the economic field which, if adopted by all member states of the United Nations, would soon reduce intransigence to reason. I ask today for adherence to these measures by every nation represented here, which is truly devoted to the principles enshrined in the Charter. I do not believe that Portugal and South Africa are prepared to commit economic or physical suicide. If honorable and reasonable alternatives exist, I believe that such alternatives can be found. We must act while we can, while the occasion exists, to exert those legitimate pressures available to us, lest time run out and resort be had to less happy means. The great nations of the world would do well to remember that in the modern age, even their own fate is not wholly in their hands. Peace requires the united efforts of us all. Who can foresee what spark might ignite the fuse? The stakes are identical for all of us. Life or death. We all wish to live. We all seek a world in which men are freed of the burdens of ignorance, poverty, hunger, and disease. And we shall all be hard-pressed to escape the deadly rain of nuclear fallout should catastrophe overtake us. The problems which confront us today are unprecedented. They have no counterpart in human experience. Men search, peruse the pages of history for solutions, for precedents. But, alas, there are none to be found. This, then, is the ultimate challenge. Where are we to look for our survival? For answers to questions which have never been asked before. We must look first to the Almighty God, who has raised man above the animals and endowed him with intelligence and reason. We must put our faith in him, that he will not desert us or permit us to destroy mankind which he created in his image. And we must look to ourselves, into the depths of our souls. We must become something we've never been, and for which our education and experience and environment have ill prepared us. We must become bigger than we have ever been, more courageous, greater in spirit, ampler in outlook. We must become members of a new race, overcoming petty prejudice, owing our ultimate allegiance not to nations, but to our fellow men within the human community.
In answer to that question, I would say that, as you know, peace has been the objective of the entire mankind, and I may say particularly so of small countries today. We have, and we are confident that we have laid down the foundation of African unity at the recent conference that was held in May in our capital, Addis Ababa. Now, for the purpose of bringing African unity, our United States represents a good example for us. Now, for this question of liberation of African countries by use of force, is our fervent desire and wish that situations will not come to this desperate stage. But however, as I stated yesterday, if there is no recourse for liberation of people under the yoke of imperialism, certainly that may be an alternative which African states would have to consider for the benefit of the continent of Africa. I would like to say that On the general question, I hope that all material, energy, and resources that are wasted for the purposes of arms race would cease to be so and would be converted for the purpose of peaceful advancement of mankind. But insofar as passing on arms to freedom fighters throughout Africa, perhaps the best first people to ask are those that have been considered to have passed such arms. But insofar as the recipients, freedom country, freedom-loving, freedom fighters are concerned, we understand their motives and it's legitimate. Yes, I believe it's imperative that the United Nations come into the picture for solving these important African problems. The reason being that the United Nations, by its own charter, is committed to the preservation of international peace and security, and since African situation is directly relevant to this important task of the United Nations, the United Nations must come in to solve it. There might be difference of opinion in the organization itself, but the resultant effect of the feeling of the United Nations is no doubt in my mind is to help African countries to achieve their independence, and also my desire and hope is in accordance to the statements I've just made. In answer to that question, I would say that the main reasons why I took this action is actually quite obvious. Education is the most useful thing to our country and indeed to all mankind. During the war, the educational process of Ethiopia was discontinued, but subsequently after the war, we took up where we started from, and we had to quicken our pace in order to compensate for lost time of enemy occupation. As soon as our liberty was restored to us, I actually took the portfolio of Ministry of Education. Now, I am happy to say, I have become the Chancellor of the University. Education being a useful thing for our country, I see no greater thing to which I dedicate myself, and I also say with happiness that it is along this field that I lay down what I consider to be one of my successful records.
በጦር አለቅነታችን ብቻና በትምህርት ሚኒስቴር ለመስራት ያስገደደን ይልቁንም በጠላት ጊዜ የተማሩ ልጆቻችን ብዙ ጠፍተውብን ነበርና ለመተካት
Foreign affairs, particularly nowadays, is a very important thing for the development of countries and for peace and stability. But despite this, we chose to take the portfolio after the war and our liberation of defense and Ministry of Education. The reason really we have done so is because we lost so many fine young men, people that served their country during the war, and we have to take this measure to quicken the pace of education so that Ethiopia again will be put right on the correct road. The government of the United States of America has been quite generous to us in matter of education, and they have given us help of which we are very appreciative, but we cannot say here that the aid we have gotten from this source, the United States, United Nations, and other international organizations are actually sufficient. The task of education is an immense one, is a matter that takes a great deal of financing to solve. We hope that Ethiopia, as well as other undeveloped countries, will continue to get the assistance of the developed countries. In answer to that question, I would say this problem under consideration now is of the highest importance. As you have just observed in posing the question, I have spoken with deep concern about this problem, and also I expressed pleasure at the actions that the federal government has taken and proposes to take in order to solve this evil problem. This matter of racial discord and discrimination is really an international matter, and perhaps in the future it will increasingly become so than it is now. Discrimination, gentlemen, violates fundamental human rights. It violates the God of law, the laws of God, and also the laws of man. In answer to that question, I would say again, reiterate the importance that this problem of racial discrimination occupies in my mind. I believe both the Eastern countries and the Western countries will actually collaborate to remove this problem, which is a scourge of mankind, to be found in different places of the world, because we all are interested and dedicated to the advancement of the world, its standard of living, and also the maintenance of peace. And this is one of the conditions precedent for the attainment of this noble human objective. Now, about Chinese influence that I've been asked about, I'll only say that to what extent Chinese will succeed in increasing their influence throughout Africa and other countries in which colored people live remains to be seen. Whatever I may say here will only be some speculation. But, however, I can state categorically that the question of using love, human brotherliness, is the most important means of influencing human beings. I would say that at the conference of heads of African states that was held last May in the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, before the signing of the charter, I have told in the speech I have made to the distinguished heads of state that people that were formerly under colonialist regime and who have suffered a great deal must have the generous spirit of wanting to collaborate with their former masters, for otherwise, through vengeance and remorse, coexistence would not be possible, and this would be detrimental to the preservation of international peace. I must say that black and white as forms of speech, as means of judging mankind, should be eliminated from human society. Human beings are precisely the same, of whatever color, race, or creed, or national origin they may be. In answer to that question, I would say there is quite a difference in the political circumstances that prevailed at the time I made my speech at the League of Nations and the present time the speech I've made to the United Nations. Now, a question of war or peace is the most urgent matter, and the posing of such a question itself is actually to pose whether mankind will survive or not, because of the gravity of the disturbance of peace. At the present time, the United Nations has got to strengthen itself to achieve and protect the universal peace. My sincere hope on my part is the organization, my sincere belief is that the organization so far has achieved many things for the purpose, for the cause of peace, and in the future I am hopeful and confident it will continue to expand its activities and strengthen itself so that international peace and security will not even be threatened once.
It has always been my purpose, before the war as well as after the war, to send students abroad so that they could study abroad and come back to help their country. In the same way as it's our purpose to employ American technicians and scientists, in the same way also it's our aim to educate our students in the field of science so that they can also participate and take part in the program of the reconstruction of the country. It is my intention to have established in the new university in Addis Ababa the different faculties of law, science and other branches of learning that one finds in any modern university in the world. When I gave a constitution to my people out of my own will, it was a constitution which was based on the constitutions of many democratic countries. It is also my intention for the future to have this constitution developed on the lines, on democratic lines. The best thing that small nations can do for the United Nation, for the peace of the world, is to follow the principles of the United Nations effectively, and also if all nations give up selfishness. Collective security is the basis of our foreign policy, and Ethiopia is prepared to stand against aggression wherever it may appear. His Imperial Majesty says that the United Nations has accomplished many important tasks already, and that it is his hope that the United Nations will continue to do good in the world in the future. The great reason for the economic expansion of Ethiopia is the abundance of its natural resources, and it's the intention of His Imperial Majesty's government to collaborate with American enterprises in order to expand even more the economic resources of the country. The first signs of uranium deposit have been found, and it's the hope of His Imperial Majesty that uranium will contribute to the development of the country at large. Ethiopia is directing her legislation towards the entry of capital into Ethiopia so that it will take part in the great development of the country for the benefit of the people. We expect most fervently the United States government to help us, to give us its assistance in all fields of Ethiopian life, public life. It is true that Ethiopia has signed a pact for military bases of 99 years with the United States of America. Ethiopia is always willing to cooperate in any alliance which is for the good of collective security. It's my conviction that nations can only preserve their independence by standing together.
Do you think there will be another world war?
ለዚህ ነብይ ለመሆን ጥቂት ያስቸግራል እንዳይነሳ ግን ተስፋ እናደርጋለን
It is my hope that it will not arise, but of course it is difficult to prophesy on such matters. The ancestry of His Imperial Majesty goes back to the first Menelik I, son of Solomon and Queen of Sheba. The proclamation, which was made in 1952, has been put into good practice, and His Imperial Majesty gives as example the fact that many people have already taken possession of their lands, and that just before he came to the United States, many more people were coming forward to take their places in the community life of villages and countryside of Ethiopia. The basis of education is the religious education which is given by the church, and students, after having accomplished their primary religious education, go to the government schools for higher and secondary studies. There are two kinds of schools. There are those which are free, and others to which you have to pay fees to go in to learn. For the time being, the highest degree that is given, or certificate that is given, is the one of the university college. But of course, in the future, when the university in Addis Ababa will be established and begin its work, the normal ordinary degree will be given to students. The only advice perhaps which His Imperial Majesty would like to leave with this gathering assembly of youth is that just in the same way as the United States has befriended the free nations of the world, so also you, the young men and women of the United States, will be the friends of people everywhere, of free people everywhere in the world. His Imperial Majesty hopes that, is sure that if the United States continues the same way as she's doing now, she will be able to preserve the peace of the world. There is no other way by which a better world can be created for a future generation than by collective security and collaboration between free nations.
We have already begun the program most essential for Ethiopia. That is, to raise the standard of living of her people through education and better health. These would be the primary objectives. Her remaining needs will not be forgotten and will also be taken care of. One individual naturally cannot shoulder the responsibility of a whole nation. We have already told this to our ministers and government officials. Our main objective in the administration of the affairs of 22 million people is that all should cooperate and share responsibility. This has always been our program and will continue to be our program. Our wish is to serve our country as an Ethiopian. It is our conviction that the administration of a country should not depend on one person, but is rather the concern of all. Each in his own way must help his country. You can say that they have learned from us, those who attempted the coup d'etat. There is nothing that we have learned from them. If you examine their demands, you will find we have already started these reforms. We would have been delighted to learn something new from them. Ethiopia does not have any intention of being the leader of Africa as such. It hopes to live harmoniously with all its African sister countries. How long did the American Confederation take to become united? I believe you even fought a war about it.
My English is very poor. The most critical issue that has failed the world in recent times was the Cuba-US conflict. The statesmanship and wisdom of Prime Minister Khrushchev has greatly helped to ease the situation. We'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate both President Kennedy and President Premier Khrushchev, as well as Secretary General Yultan.
When Jesus Christ was born from Virgin Mary, from that time on, he lived an exemplary life, a life which men everywhere must emulate. This life and the faith that he has taught us assures us of salvation, assures us also of harmony and good life upon earth. Because of the exemplary character of the life of Jesus Christ, it is necessary that all men do their maximum in their human efforts to see to it that they approximate as much as they can the good example that has been set by him. It's quite true that there is no perfection in humanity. From time to time, we make mistakes. We do commit sins. But even as we do that, deep in our heart as Christians, we know we have a chance of forgiveness from the Almighty. He taught us that all men are equal, regardless of sex, their national origin and tribe. And he also taught us, all who seek him shall find him. To live in this healthy life, a Christian life, is what makes me follow Jesus Christ. I would tell a person that's considering the claim of Christ for the first time that it is necessary to have faith in the Almighty, that it's necessary to have love, and that it's necessary to conduct oneself in a manner that we have been taught to do in the Bible. I would advise him to read
and to study the Bible. I would also advise him to seek secular knowledge. For the more one knows, the more he realizes the need for a prime mover, the need for a creator who's good, and the need for salvation and also for peaceful life upon earth. I'll also tell him to learn and to think for himself the ways he would serve the Lord. In these thoughts and in this undertaking of his, he will inevitably find the way of serving his fellow men. For his faith would then be manifested by his conduct. If Christians behave in this way, if we dedicate ourselves to this fundamental task, then we will have a peaceful world and will be assured of not transgressing against the will and the commandments of God. There are many instances in my life where the belief in the Almighty and the Christian faith has sustained me times of trouble and difficulties. No matter what may befall a human being, he can always succeed in overcoming it in time if he has the strength of faith and praise to God. For inevitably, he comes to the assistance of those that believe in him and those that through their work live an exemplary life. This goes not only for Christians in my view, but for all men. I think God commiserates with those that find themselves in misfortune. In particular, when my country Ethiopia was invaded by alien forces several years ago, I was sustained in that period by my faith in God and in the abiding belief that justice, however it may take time, will ultimately prevail. If I did not have faith in the Almighty and in His righteousness and that justice inevitably prevails, then I would have lost hope, and that thus the interest of my country would have been ignored. Because I attempted to maintain my faith in Him, and because all Ethiopians maintained their faith in the ultimate goodness of the world and in the grand design that the Almighty has for all men in the world, we were able to victoriously re-enter our country and rid ourselves of evil forces. If I did not have in my heart the love of God, I don't think I would have acted in a manner that I did. The love of God brings a sense of religiousness in a human being. It gives him comfort for the future and assurance that right causes will ultimately prevail.
ቅዱስ ጳውሎስ ያለው የተሳሳተ ቃል አይደለም።
What St. Paul said here is not a mistaken statement. You all know what St. Paul was and what kind of work he was engaged in before his conversion. Later on, after his conversion, he had faith and love, and if he had not had that, he would not have taught people this in his epistles. Neither love nor faith are separable from each other. An elaboration of this is Paul's exposition in one of his epistles, which speaks of love and faith. Without love, all of our human efforts in the sight of God can be useless. He loved us, and on our behalf, he was given as a ransom, and it was because of love and his love for us that he accomplished the act of love.
ቤተ ክርስቲያን የተባለው የቤቱ ህንጻ ብቻ አይደለም።
The church is not merely a building. The church is the faithful fulfillment of the Christian life and its requirements. Thus, as the name applies to the building, so is our heart, the church in which God dwells. After our blameless Creator was sent to this world by His Father, then the hearts of all believers became the temple of God. The love of Christ cannot be fathomed by a series of questions and answers, and man's soul cannot experience deeper enrichment as a result. We believe that man can at all times be bound by His love and grace. All men are endowed with natural responsibility. This responsibility is in turn distributed and delegated to all according to his gift, and it is expected of each one to fulfill his responsibility. This responsibility in turn is to God, and thus, for example, one would start his working by asking God to bless the beginning and thank God for a good ending too. We believe that all people, in all of their responsibilities delegated to them, will begin and finish their work in God's name. I give you a brief answer. If we go on into details, we would have to spend a long time discussing. I have the highest respect for the Bible as a whole. We also recognize the rightful name the Bible bears. We find that in all the periods of the Old Testament, in the time of patriarchs, kings, and prophets, great miracles were done. On the other hand, the New Testament, in which our Lord Himself gave the command to go to all the world and to preach, is also of high value. Then Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels in which the sayings of our Lord are recorded, are pillars for all men on the earth. Therefore, the Bible should not be cut into portions. On this occasion, I address also all those within our empire. Our Christianity is not restricted to a given church, and I stress above all that we do not wish to make distinctions. My advice to all is to fulfill the 10 Commandments. You are aware of the contents of the 10 Commandments and can elaborate on it. If the nation for which I am the emperor follows and accepts this, since it's also what I accept and follow, I would believe our country is not only historically Christian, but also actively Christian. The birth of our Lord is a joyous family event. However, I do not only rejoice with my immediate family, since the whole Ethiopian nation is my family. I say this in the context of Christmas being observed by all churches in Ethiopia. I rejoice on this occasion also because of Jesus Christ being given for us. For He was born in the lowly place and got warmth by animals. This fact encourages us to celebrate it with joy. When I have visited the 5 large continents, I have not been anywhere where there was not a church. All over the world, I have come to know that the birth of Jesus Christ is celebrated.